Yo, what up, Jose? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so I thought it was good. We're having this conversation as we're going live. You got some agents in your office, and we're triangulating ideas. And I think that this is great. That I think a lot of people could get value from it. And what I've noticed, and I think you've noticed it as well, is because information is like readily available. People watch podcasts, they read some books, and they start to kind of try to put eggs in multiple different baskets.
Mm-hmm.
They have this entrepreneurial mind. They want to get ahead. So they think like, oh, I need to spend a little bit of time dabbling with like investments.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I got to learn about like index funds. Then I got to learn about like, maybe like I'll buy a property and I'll manage it myself. And then maybe I got to do this. And as people are a little bit further down the path, me and you have this awareness where it's like, hey, this is my thinking. And I'm curious to see your thoughts on it. I think we're completely in alignment. Number one is you shouldn't spend any time or any resources on anything else other than learning how to sell real estate in high volume until you're making $250,000 a year in top line. Right? Continuing to pour into yourself and continuing to acquire, that skill set. And then continuing to build your business to where you can do that predictably and duplicatively. The second is, my opinion is, I shouldn't spend any time on active investments until my active investments pay me more money than my earned income. Okay. And for most people, that's never. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what he was saying, he was like, well, like I'm messing around with like an index fund and I got like, I don't know, however much money doing it. But me and you were both trying to tell him, and it was interesting because he was politely arguing with us. Polite disagreement, right? Like, nah, bro, like, okay, fine. But like not, that like we need to agree to disagree, where it's like, no, we need to keep staying here and triangulating ideas until something will come to the surface that's more true.
Yeah. What comes to mind for me is when I started selling real estate, there's so many people along the way that try to deviate you from the goal of selling real estate in high volume.
Agreed.
So I'll give you an opportunity or an example. I started selling real estate. My cousin joins PHP, which is a financial company or insurance company. And he goes, let me invite you to this event. They're like, hey, look, you could actually continue being a realtor, but you could actually get your license and then refer them to us and earn additional income. And what I told them, I'm like, no, I know how this begins. Like, basically, like, that's what you're saying now, but eventually you're going to be like, hey, look, like, let's focus more time, energy, and resources into this, and you can make more money than this. And I think your ability to say no at the very beginning is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And once you commit to something, I almost like put these blinders on, not to ideas within what I want to do, but to things outside of that, basically.
Yeah.
And I committed to it. And I said, look, this is the only thing. There was other things like, oh, you can make a little bit of money here. You can make a little bit of money there. And I'm like, I know that I can, but I believe that if I become the best at just this one thing, this will reward me disproportionately more than anything else. And that's what I did. I basically went on a quest to become the very best at real estate. I made a commitment that nobody was going to know more about real estate than me. I made a commitment that nobody was going to be a better salesperson, at least in my market, than me. I made a commitment.
Hey, you see how he qualified that? My market, he knows what's up. He knows what's up.
No, I didn't want to hurt his feelings.
That's what it is. That's what it is. Okay. Continue.
It's funny because somebody like you, because you're a good listener, because you know what to say, you're able to pick up on things like that because you're a good listener, and I'll pick up on things like that too when somebody makes a comment like that because I'm focused on that. So and that's what I was telling the agent, because the agent came to me and is like, hey, look, like, did you see what happened to the stock market today? And I'm like, yeah, it dropped. And then he goes, yeah, and I'm like, do you also know what? He's like, he thought I was going to tell him it doesn't matter. And I told him, well, look, that's why like I like the private lending better than the real estate. I told him, or that than the stock market. And he goes, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, look, the stock market's down whatever it is this week, but on my private loans, I'm earning 8.5 to 10%. I'm like, when the stock market drops 10% in a year, let's say it drops, that means the next year you got to make 20 to average it out to 10. If you're
Yeah.
consistently earning 8.5 to 10% without it going down, you don't have to make 20%. You just have to make 8.5 to 10% consistently every single year. And then you're good. And I told him that's what I wanted. I didn't want the volatility of the stock market, basically. Then he tells me that he day trades, and I'm like, dude, like then I asked him how much he's day trading. He's like, oh, like I've got like $12,000. I'm like, dude, you realize you can make that in one commission if you can double your money if you just spend time learning how to sell real estate in high volume.
In high volume. That's exactly right. So, and this is why this idea that I shouldn't spend any time, energy, or resources on anything else other than acquiring that skill set, that specialized knowledge, in my opinion, until I'm earning like 250 to 300, because at that level, now you have enough extra income, depending on how you're managing your life and you're not getting wild with lifestyle after taxes and expenses, where there should be like 50 to 100 left over. And now we can start to pick our head up and look at other things, how we could be allocating and preserving our purchasing power, which is really what investing is about. And my philosophy has been, and I know me and you, for a little bit, we triangulated ideas, and now we're kind of more in alignment on that thinking, is I really want operational partners as it pertains to investing, right? So I want people that are professionals, that are very good at what they do. So instead of me owning the physical assets of real estate, a lot of the investing I do is through syndications where there's a professional investor. If I do choose equities, it's with like index funds. There's various different reasons as to why, various different books to explain as to why, because you can't, statistically over time, there's only like 5 people on the planet that has ever beat the market over an extended period of time. So let's operate it under the assumption that that's not you. And, funds usually revert to the mean, right? And expenses, you can't overcome the drag of expenses. So the only thing I can control is expenses. So with index funds, they pass on the savings in the form of lower expenses. So then I get more of the market return. And my job is just to put money there. And that's worked very well, over the last 15, 20 years that I've been doing that consistently over time. So choosing investment vehicles and not looking at the investment vehicles as other than just like a storehouse of value. And then so I can just continue to remain focused on this profession of selling real estate in high volume, because it's pretty wild. Like to your point, if that $12,000 in the amount of time that he's spending, let's say he's spending 5-10 hours a week, whatever it is, to what? Like make a couple $100 or whatever it is, in the hopes it'll hit a home run one day, when the probability is that, after expenses and taxes and all the other stuff, it's going to come out like a wash. If he were to invest that money in himself, in acquiring the specialized knowledge of what to say and how to say it, and go down that journey, he starts doing 20 deals a year in your marketplace, or 30 deals a year like Jaime in your marketplace, bro, he'll make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in a year, which will put him in the top 1% of income earners in the country and the top 0.01% of income earners on the planet. And I think the main mental map that is so important, and what we're trying to really get across here, is that people think that investments are their best tool, right? As it pertains to like building wealth. It's not, it's your income.
That's the best tool.
That's the best tool. So it's focusing on continuing to rise that income. And the way you're going to do that is by acquiring skills and stacking skills, right? And acquiring specialized knowledge.
Yeah. And then like, even a lot of people don't realize this, but that time that he's spending on that, it clouds the mind.
Yes.
Meaning that like it takes away focus from what really, really matters. And then it was funny because this same agent that basically I had this conversation with this morning is the same agent that we had a quarterly meeting, and we were talking about like how some of the more productive agents like Jaime or my sister Marisol, they have another licensed agent attend their home inspection report, because it takes, or home inspections for buyers, because it takes 2 to 3 hours basically to be there, opening the door, letting the inspector be there. And a comment that he made, and this is just flaws in thinking. He's like, well, look, I don't have the money like Jaime and Marisol to be able to hire somebody at $100 to attend a home inspection report. And what I told them, I'm like, it's actually backwards, bro. You don't have the money because you're not investing those $100 to basically not attend that home inspection report that's costing you 2 to 3 hours, which those 2 to 3 hours you could be spending on income producing activities, meaning activities that generate income for you. And it has to do with just flaws in thinking.
Yeah. So what that makes me think of is what Jim Rohn would say is that like producing outcomes are a few disciplines practiced daily, and not producing favorable outcomes are a few errors in judgment practiced daily. So to your point, that's an error in judgment in terms of how he's thinking about time.
Yeah.
Right. And what's interesting is when most people, which played out as we were having this conversation, and again, we love you, because I don't know if you'll watch this or whatever, but like what played out is as we're triangulating and me and you were pushing back on how he's thinking, he resisted it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty interesting, right? I think it's normal and natural in that anything that goes against what we currently believe to be true, we perceive it as a threat, right? So we like immediately shut it down. At the same time, it's incredibly limiting, right? So to your point, like you even said to him, I heard you say, it's like, hey man, if you have a couple of people that are
wealthier
wealthy, like if they're talking about money, you should probably be quiet and listen. You should probably take notes. Not like, hey, here's what I think. Like, no, it should probably be like, hey, tell me what you think. And also tell me, how did you get to that thinking? Like, tell me the principles behind your thinking. Tell me the logic behind your thinking, the mental maps behind the thinking. Right? Because that once you acquire that, then you can begin to take action and you'll produce different outcomes.
And the reality is the difference between a top producer and a low producer, a lot of it is how they think about things. The difference between somebody wealthy and somebody not wealthy is the way that they think about certain things. So the way that you think about things, like him thinking like, oh, I'm actually losing $100 by having somebody attend the home inspection versus me like, hey, $100, I'm saving 3 hours, which means in those 3 hours, I can likely take a listing in those 3 hours and make $10,000 to $15,000. I'm 100xing my money, So it's just a different way of thinking about money, thinking about time, and then also understanding what you said. And I hadn't really thought about it that way, that the best vehicle we have for growing our wealth is our income. Meaning if we can get our income up, that gives us different opportunities to actually invest and multiply our money.
That's right. So you remember what you said to me, and you were kind enough to share it with me when we were on vacation together, which we need to do again now that the kids are a little bit older. But yeah, you said to me, you were like, hey bro, I told Mariela, like if I didn't learn how to list property in high volume,
I would not be where I'm at.
None of this stuff, like I wouldn't own any of the properties. I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff, which goes back to what we just shared, right? Which is all encapsulated in that kind of nugget, which is that your greatest tool for building wealth is your income.
Yeah.
And being hyper focused on increasing your ability to earn income. And that comes from not just hard work, because we all know people who work really, really hard and don't have a lot of money, right? What it comes from is acquiring specialized knowledge, right? And then learning how to apply that knowledge and making yourself more valuable to the marketplace. And this goes back to like Jim Rohn's teachings, which are like, hey, the person, let's say, who works at a hotel, who are the hardest working people at the hotel? The ones who clean up, but they make the least amount of money. So what does that tell us about how we value that manual work? We don't value it as much. It's not as valuable. Not that they're not valuable in the eyes of God as people and like all that stuff, but like from an economic perspective, it's not that valuable. Who makes the most amount of money in that whole hotel? The manager who manages that whole hotel, which is a different specialized knowledge, right? And then who makes even more? Well, the regional manager. And who makes even more? The CEO. And each one requires specialized knowledge and more skills, right? So I wish it was such a thing. Well, actually, I don't, because we wouldn't develop character. But I think a lot of people wish that it was such a thing that you can get rich on demand by like picketing or rioting or like, you know what I mean, holding up signs or striking. And that's not actually how it works, right? So I think all of that other stuff is a distraction. And I see young people that are smart, hardworking, and ambitious get caught up in it at the beginning of their career. Like one of the guys we just partnered with, Daniel, he's 27. He already owns like 4 or 5 properties. Like, good for him, dude. Like, that's awesome. But I also know it's a major distraction. Because he's like, yeah, bro, I'm putting a roof on one. I got to go meet out this person. I got to go do this. And that. It's like, it's getting in the way. And he does like 30 deals a year. But I know that if he focused, he'd do 100 and make a ton of money. So what I would suggest, like to me, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'd be like, hey, how could you still get access to that asset class, but do it in a way where you have an operational partner, you get residual and monthly distributions, but you don't have to do anything. And you can stay focused on the thing that allows you to raise capital.
Yeah. Or if he wants to be an active investor as well, too, finding ways to delegate those things so that you're not out there meeting with the roofer or a plumber or an electrical person or a foundation person, finding so what I did, like we do flips. And when I started doing flips, I realized that I was having to go out there, meet with the contractor. I was having to go out there, meet with the designer. I was having to pick finishes. And when I did the math, I'm like, yeah, I made $60,000, but during all the time that I invested, could I have just sold 5 homes and made $100,000 with less risk? I'm like, yeah, I could have. So I said, okay, I'm still coming across the flip opportunities. How can I structure it in a way where I don't have to go out to the property? So I basically got a partner, an operational partner, which is my sister, and her husband's a contractor. And then I was like, okay, I don't like the money aspect of it. So my dad became a partner and he became a money partner in the deal as well, too. So I was like, okay, now I've structured it in a way where the money doesn't come from me and the finishes and the labor don't come from me. All I have to do is tie up the deal, which I'm good at that and I enjoy that, and then list it on the back end.
That's right.
And so creating structures where it still allows you to do the thing that's going to bring the highest return, which is tying up deals.
That's right. And I actually brought you up as an example as I was speaking to him. I'm like, yeah, like if you are going to do that, I want you to hear me. I'm not saying like it's all bad. If you are going to do that, though, you have to create operational partners or a system around it. And I shared with him, yep, like Jose's sister, she kind of is that managing partner and the operational partner. And then her husband owns a construction company. So like you have operational partners who run that side. Now, so all that requires of you is to look at properties and make decisions in terms of acquisitions and maybe like a little, and maybe like a little bit of oversight, but like not nearly as much as and even then I shared with him, as time has progressed and as Jose's understanding of time and of friction and of leverage has progressed. I remember distinctly, I was on a call with you. This was way back. We were at like, I don't know, maybe like 100 agents. Mm-hmm. Now we're approaching like 500 pretty soon.
I know, crazy. It just jumped.
So, I know. So anyway, we were having this conversation and I said to you, I was like, bro, I'm having this wild awareness. And you were like, I remember distinctly where I was. I was at one of Sebastian's soccer games. And you're like, what is it? I'm like, I'm recognizing that I can do way more with operational partners and do stuff through other people than I can on my own efforts.
Yeah.
And you were like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we onboarded like 24 agents this month, but I personally only brought 1. So through the help of others, and we have operational partners who run it, which is the XP, right? And that's just that example. And then I remember you said to me, you're like, yeah, bro, like what I'm starting to become aware of is more often than not now in terms of an approach, I'm going to do wholesale instead of flipping. Like I might do some flipping, but it's not the primary exit strategy because of and even though you have operational partners, because of the friction, because of like all the stuff, you're like, yeah, dude, this is just easier. And I'm aware I leave a little bit of money on the table, but that's okay. I'd rather just like velocity and keep it moving.
Well, I think that part too, it's understanding risk. So a lot of people, when they look at an opportunity, and this is so interesting, they only analyze the upside, but they don't analyze the downside.
Ever.
And like, for example, like when you're hand selecting stocks, it's actually the highest form of risk.
Yes.
Because that one stock can go to zero.
It's concentrated risk.
It's concentrated. Buying the S&P or an index fund of the S&P is a low risk strategy because it's a diversified portfolio, but hand selecting stocks, highest form of risk.
Agreed.
So whenever I lost some money on some flips when the interest rates went up in March or May of 2022. The market dropped 10 to 15%. Projects went over budget, wiped out a lot of the profit. Some of them we held on to them a little bit longer to lose a little bit less money, but in the end we ended up losing money on those projects. But what I learned from that is I started underwriting the properties differently. And when I started underwriting them, I'm like, okay, let's say the marketplace changes and I have to hold on to this asset. Am I okay with holding on to this asset? And if so, for how long? And what I realized is I'm okay if I'm losing $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month if I have to hold on to it to eventually recover. That's not going to break the bank. But I don't do like a lot of high-end flips. And the reason I don't do a lot of high-end flips, if the marketplace changes, I'm not okay with losing $10,000 a month. I'm not
Right.
okay with losing $15,000 a month. So I basically created a little buy box as to like, okay, if I flip it and I'm not wholesaling it, would I be okay with keeping it? Do I have other options to be able to make this property cash flow and still be okay with it? But that's the part that I noticed that a lot of people, when they're underwriting investments, they only look at the upside and they don't look at the downside.
And the same is true with, let's say somebody, it says, hey, I'm going to buy this property and it's going to cash flow like 500 a month, whatever it is. So they're looking at that and the upside. They're not looking at the
opportunity costs
of their time. So in other words, like, let's say, I'll give you a perfect example. So a guy who's partnered with us, David, he bought a condo in Florida, flip, and I would stay away from that for all different reasons, but he decided to do it. He got at a very steep discount, right? Only looking at the upside. And was like, okay, well, how long is this going to take to do? He's like, I think I could be in and out in 90 days. Well, it ended up taking like 6 months for various different reasons. He ended up selling it for way less than what his initial expectation was, which is usually more optimistic than realistic. And yeah, he made, let's say like 40 grand, right? But then you know what happened to his production that first quarter?
Drop.
It dropped dramatically, bro. You know what he realized? He was like, bro, if I would have just stayed dialed in, I could have made way more than 40,000 that first quarter. I'm like, yeah, I know. Right. So
not only that, had he just wholesaled it and maybe made $20,000 or even $15,000, he would have cashed out and his production would have gone up. Correct. Or stayed the same, and it actually would have made the same amount of money or more, basically.
That's right. And I see so many agents do this where, because 65% of us, grew up living paycheck to paycheck, and if you're smart, hardworking, and ambitious, if there's money anywhere, we try to grab it. Yeah. I was going to say, it's frequent that I see agents that they like have a property management company that doesn't really do that much. They sell real estate. They own a short-term rent. Like, they do all of these little things, right? Which maybe make them like a little bit of money. But if they would just focus, drop half of them, focus. I was on a call with this lady. She's like, yeah, I have this team. I'm like, how many agents? She's like, 2. I'm like, oh, and how many units do they do? She's like, well, I do 90% of all my production. And I'm like, okay. Can I ask you a question? She's like, yeah. I'm like, why do you have those agents? She didn't really have an answer. I know why. It's just ego. That's the only reason why you would have them. Yeah. Just to say you do. But it's not productive, it's not efficient, and it's taking time. She's like, oh, because I got to follow up with them and make sure they're doing what they're doing. I'm like, well, that's taken away from your own personal productivity, right? So I think some critical mental maps is time, risk, understanding that your best
opportunity
cost, understanding that the best vehicle you have for building wealth is your income, and maniacally, obsessively focused on increasing your value so you can add more value to the marketplace and you be compensated more. And then my personal opinion, and I know we differ this a little bit because you've done more with active investments, but my personal opinion for most is, I mean, even you will tell people, you're like, bro, what you did, you're like, dude, it was really stressful. Like,
yeah, it's challenging. Yeah.
It's not for everybody. You know what I'm saying? And I think for most people, the vast majority, probably 90%, once you start to earn enough where there's leftover and you can start to put it into other things once you get to that, like, let's say like 250, 300 in GCI, and you can start to put it into other investment vehicles, I personally would choose things that are passive in nature, where you have operational partners so you can stay focused and then take that 250 or 300 and turn it into 600 or turn it into $1 million in GCI.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's funny because all this talk about like time and flips, it makes me, or I'll tell you what I was going to say. The flips that I like doing now are properties that are fully renovated. So the
Mm,
last three flips or three out of the last four flips that I've done, one of them we had to renovate, but three out of the four were move-in ready. We
mm,
literally have to like maybe touch up a couple pieces of paint, stage it, and put it back on the market. So literally from the time we buy it, they're back on the market within 1 week.
mm.
1 week. And I'm just like, I love those because it's just like it's a normal listing basically, and it's like it's quick basically. So whenever it's quick, it reduces risk as well too.
Yes, and there's also a lot less friction. There's a lot less moving parts. So
Moving
like
parts.
you said, a little sprucing up, and then maybe you have it professionally cleaned, you stage and you put it on the market. Fine.
That's it.
But there's just not a lot of friction there. And I think because the vast majority of us grew up in families that live paycheck to paycheck, our concept of money and like wanting to get it at all costs, it ends up causing issues, right? Where we become kind of unaware or blinded. The opportunity to make money blinds us from the opportunity cost. It blinds us from what's actually really valuable, right? Where now you've been refining that process over time. Because I know at first you would probably, everything you did was a flip. And then you were like, bro, it got out of hand. It was wild. You're like, dude, this is not manageable. And then you rethought that. And then you're like, okay, let's do some wholesales. And then you started to do those and you were like, oh yeah, this is way better. And then even now the flip process has been refined where 75% of the flips you've done, they're ready to go versus you having to go in there and do a lot of work.
Yeah. So it's a lot of refinement. And even like I think back like at some of the things I do, like people trip out because I have my barber come on Sunday nights to my house and he cuts my hair and I pay him like $100 plus tip. And people are like, that's a lot of money. I'm like, no, it's actually not, because I don't have to go get a haircut on a Wednesday afternoon and wait 30 minutes and drive 30 minutes and then get a haircut. He literally just comes and he comes when I'm available as well too.
Yeah.
So the other thing too, when I remodeled this house, and it was funny because even in my level of thinking, I hired a designer, and the designer had two options. One, I can just design it for you, or two, I can project manage it for you. And the difference was a lot. The difference was like $2,000 or $20,000, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was like, okay, like you can design it. And what I told my wife, I was like, I tried negotiating with her a little bit. I'm like, hey, would you do it for like 12 or something like that? She's like, no. I'm like, would you do it for 15? She's like, no. She's like, I'll take $1,000 off for you. And then I sat there and I'm like, is this worth it? And then what I said, I'm like, if she does what she says she's going to do, I'm like, this is going to make my life a lot easier. And it's going to allow me to focus on selling real estate in high volume. Because I did that, I basically like killed it during the year. Had I not done that, my production would have dropped and I would have gone over budget, which means I would have been in a messed up situation because I basically went over budget and my production dropped as a result. But because I invested those $20,000, my production was high and it was able to cover anything that I went over budget because of the production, basically.
Yeah. And this is interesting because I'm reading a book right now, like on economics. It's a third book by the same author, the guy who wrote the Bitcoin Standard. But he was talking about value and how value is actually like subjective versus like some people might, and we think price and value the same thing. They're not. So when she presented that to you, the value of your time And your understanding of the value of your time when played out over days, weeks, months, and a course of a year in planning everything and preparing everything and doing everything on the build out of your home, the money was actually less valuable to you than the time that it would save.
Well,
And that is at the crux of this conversation, right? So we think, and I think that that's wild because like in traditional kind of economics or westernized or Keynesian economics, they think that value is like objective, like that you can like place a numerical value on it without taking into account human behavior and subjectivity, which is like, well, to somebody it might be more valuable to somebody else. And for you, your time was more valuable. You recognize that, and you know that from like actual experience.
yeah.
So instead of the 40 hours, imagine 50 hours of you going back and forth, looking at stuff, like whatever, bro, for you, a whole month, you can make $100,000, $200,000 in a month. So it's like, why am I going to futz around with 20? Like the 20 is less valuable in my time.
Yeah. And it was crazy because whenever she had a question, she'd be like, "Hey, can you guys jump on a Zoom call?" Never had to leave my office. She'd jump on a Zoom call. She's like, "Hey guys, I have these 3 options. Which one do you like better?" Be like, "I like that one better." Dude, she would come to the house and be like, "Hey, these are these are 4 samples of 4 different door handles. Which one do you like better?" And my wife would be like this. And it is one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever had in my life on a renovation, because everything came out the way that we wanted it to, and it was thanks to her, basically.
Yeah. And like to the end, what I'm aware of too, and I think you would agree with me, even though initially it caused you to pause for a second,
I
you're
did,
like,
yeah.
it's 20 because it's like 20. But I'm aware too that that's changed over time for you. So like, I'm sure in the past when it was 10, you might have paused.
Yeah.
Now, like 20 makes you pause and you're like, wait, what is this? Let me think about this for a second. Right. So it required a little bit of thought. And then you
Well,
recognize you're like, wait a minute, like, oh man, my time. And like, yeah, for sure. And what I would propose, it was actually cheap because when you play out how much I know you, bro. Like when you get into something, bro, you would have been obsessed with it, and you would have been like going to the store all the time and looking at everything and whatever. And then Mariela in her head, she would have been like, "Oh my god!" And I got to go with you with the kids. It would have been like this whole thing, bro.
not only that, but I actually hate that process, bro.
Yeah,
Like, meaning I don't like picking out finishes. I
yeah,
don't and I'm like, as it relates to those things, it's like you have too many options, bro. So if you have 100 options, it's like, okay, like which one's gonna look better and which one's gonna match with the flooring. Like I remember the condo that I bought that was commercial on the bottom, residential on top. I actually went to Dunn Edwards to pick the paint. I went to pick the flooring, and I hated that process because I felt like I was living below my potential, and meaning that like I understand that I can make a lot more money selling real estate. And I think that's what a lot of people need to understand, that the amount of money that you can make by selling real estate in high volume is insane compared to a lot of the other things that you're trying to save $100 here, $300 there, $500 here.
yeah.
Selling
And
real
that
estate in high
shows.
volume will fix all your problems, or not
Agreed.
fix a lot of the problems,
Well, yeah, a lot of money
all your
problems,
financial problems. Yeah.
yeah, financial problems.
And
Yeah,
and
there's
even
no
and even some personal ones, because some personal ones could be fixed by throwing money at things, you know?
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's interesting because it reveals an evolution of thinking. So when you had that commercial property with your house on the top or the residential on the top, you were still operating in this like DIY mentality. And truthfully, at that moment, even though you were doing pretty well, your concept of the value of your time, you were still tied to price. Your conception of value was still tied to price, right? And now here we are where you have this build out with your home, however many years later, 7, 8, 9 years later. Now your concept of time, and even though the price caused you to reflect for a second, you were like, wait a minute, yeah, dude, I really don't like this process. Number one, number two, oh my, it's going to take so much time because it's such a big project. It might take 100 hours of my life and my brain power and like Mariela's brain power, and like we're gonna have to go back and forth to the thing. It's like this whole thing. Like, nah, dude, it's worth it. And then it played out to be exceptionally worth it because in a marketplace, think about this: you were doing that when your marketplace dropped 50%
Yeah.
in transaction volume. So because you made that decision to trade money for time and you recognize that your time is more valuable, you were able to maintain your level of GCI and production volume as you did the year before that, which was a better year in transaction volume.
Well, even even when I bought my first property, I actually painted the first property myself.
Of course you did, bro.
Yeah,
Of course you did. Hey,
that
you
was
know what
back
I
in
did?
2010. The first property, I painted it myself, bro,
Yeah, the first
with
property
my
that I
mom and my
yeah,
younger siblings,
I love it, bro. You
and
had like banda
and
playing in the background
and a pizza
and a pizza.
and a six pack, bro.
Yeah, bro. So look, it shows you the evolution of thinking. When I bought my first condo, me and Carla tried to put the flooring in ourselves.
That's crazy.
And what's why I'd never done that before in my life. So we're just like, we're not measuring anything, whatever. We get to the end and like Tetris, it won't fit. So I look at Carla, I'm like, bro. So then I gotta call somebody, okay? Get him to come out. It took him like an hour to take apart what we did in an hour. It took us like 3 days to get it to where like it wouldn't fit. It took him like 3 hours to like do the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, bam. So, but it's the same progression and evolution of thinking, bro. That's what it is. And beliefs around price, around value, around your capability, your ability to produce revenue with your time.
Yeah. It's funny because as it relates to the designer, I think a lot of people are like, well, I can build the bathroom for that. Why would I give her 20,000 when I can build a bathroom for that? It's like, no. And then I was listening to Myron Golden today, and Myron was talking about the value as well, too. He's like, look, he's like, if I charged you $1 million, would you pay it? It's like, well, the only way you would pay it is if you're getting like a certain X return on your money. Like, what if I told you that with that $1 million, I could help you make 10 million?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be worth it to you?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for us in real estate. The reason that was worth it is because I know that with that same amount of time, if I invest that correctly, I can make a lot more.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting to conceptualize too, this idea of value and it being subjective. So let's say you're selling something for $1,000. Well, what that means is that the seller believes that what they're selling is worth less than $1,000. Otherwise, they wouldn't take your 1,000.
Yeah.
And the buyer believes that what you're selling is worth more than $1,000. That's why they're willing to part with $1,000 for the product or service. So if you think about that, if you put that in the context of, you paying for the designer or whatever, you were willing, she was willing to give up her time
For those 20.
And you thought that your 20 was less valuable than getting back your time. That's really what's happening. That's the exchange that's happening.
And I even asked myself, I told my wife, I'm like, how does she even make money on this? And this is the only conclusion that I could jump into. She orders all the parts. I'm sure that she gets some sort of points or credits on the back end on everything based. That's the only way that would make sense. Other than that, the $20,000 for the amount of work, it would have zero penciling out on this.
Yeah, with a high degree of probability, it's probably she gets stuff at wholesale. And then just maybe charges you retail for whatever she orders, which is fine. Like, good. I want you to make money. Like, do it.
No, I don't think that's the way it's structured because we paid the bills directly to vendors, but I think that she gets credits or points where now, like, if you get a certain amount of points, you get something for free or you get money back or something like that, basically. So,
yeah. So, I mean, I think this is really good because as agents, I think it's very difficult to try to figure out what's worth time.
Yeah.
And I think what we're both saying is that the thing that's the most worth stacking time on top of and dedicating time to is learning how to prospect, do lead follow-up, go on appointments, negotiate deals, and sell real estate in high volume.
And basically how to become a listing agent. Because I think about like my journey of becoming a listing agent. Right now, Jaime is becoming a listing agent. And I look at the journey that I went through. I don't believe that I would be in the position that I am right now had I not made the shift to selling listings in high volume, meaning like two or five of the properties that I bought, the owners came to me like saying, hey, look, like, you want to list this for me potentially, and I'm like, why don't I just buy it from you?
Yeah.
Or I prospected a probate and they're like, look, it's coming on the market. We already have a listing agent. And I had a 60-day head start to be able to raise capital because I already knew that property was coming on the market and I knew who the listing agent was going to be.
Your 20-door apartment building came from prospecting on an expired on a past client. So yeah, I mean, I think that's 100% accurate. So PLAN around the most leveraged thing you can do in this business, which is list property. Yeah. So learning to become a dominant listing agent. And what we're both saying here is like, look, anything that gets in the way of that, if it takes you 5 years, it took me 5 years to get up to 100 transactions in a calendar year, right? So whatever gets in the way of you learning how to do that in high volume, understanding the mental maps that are required, understanding the specialized knowledge that's required, understanding the systems that are involved in being able to do transactions at that volume. Yeah. It just needs to go. It needs to, I'm just saying no for this season. Right. And just stay hyper-focused. And I promise you, like, you'll be very happy with the outcomes. You'll have way more money. And then we can have a conversation about like, hey, how do you deploy that?
What to do with it basically at that point.
Yeah. Like trying to figure out what to do with 10 or 12,000 bucks. And I mean this lovingly. It's like, come on, man. Like, go get some, like,
let's focus on helping your income come up, basically.
Yeah. So exactly. So now we have like enough, because like who's going to get ahead on that amount? Like nobody. So we need to focus on raising revenue, so that way you have enough where we can actually start to do something with it.
Yeah, because the interest at 10% on $12,000 is $1,200 a year, which is basically like $100 a month, basically. You know, so if you're spending like 5 hours a week trying to get a 10% return on your money, you're really like spending 5 hours to make $100.
Yeah, and I think the difference exactly, and I think the issue is we get these strongholds in our mind. So it was pretty interesting. Like as you were talking to him when he was in the office, we were waiting to get on. I could tell by his tone that he wasn't going to do what you were saying, because he has a stronghold in his mind. Like a stronghold is like when we believe a lie, even when confronted with the truth, or we believe a lie as though it was true. Right? So the lie that we're told is that doing it yourself will lead to you becoming wealthy. And that's not actually true. What it'll lead to is you having multiple different jobs, and sure, you'll save resources, but you won't really build anything and you won't grow that much. Right? So I think what's important is for everybody who's watching this to maybe go back and say, hey, what am I currently giving time to that is something other than prospect, lead, follow-up, go on appointments, negotiate deals, doing everything I can to master becoming a world-class listing agent, role-playing on a regular basis, like studying different kind of techniques and tactics, joining role-play calls with us, like just getting, reading quotes doesn't give you grit. I see all these people like post these motivational quotes, like, that are like Kobe or whatever. And like quotes don't give you grit. Doing work does. Getting in the mud does. So like go about acquiring that. And the issue is it's a weed out process. I mean, we had a call with a guy and like we gave him some really tough love on the role play thing. And I was like, look, bro, for you to say out loud that you think that you're like at the level in terms of skills, it's wildly prideful because your results aren't showing that. And you're also having a temper tantrum because it's not happening as fast as you want. But it's like, bro, like if it took 7 years, he's like, well, this rate's going to take 7 years. I'm like, all right, would it be worth it? Like if that's what it took. And I think people think like, oh, you have a choice. You want to be great. You want to be the dominant. You want to be the number one agent in Ventura County for listing properties for 7 years in a row. You want to be the number one listing agent in Broward County out of 20,000 agents. You think you have a choice? You don't have any choice. There's certain things that you have to do on a regular basis. You know what I'm saying? And then you just have to be willing to outlast people, like do it more and longer than most people are willing to do it.
Well, even when I cold called a lot, like meaning at the very beginning of my career, I looked at that as I had so many conversations with so many different people that when you have that, it basically speeds up the learning process over and over, because you begin to get muscle memory on, okay, what I got beat up on, what responses didn't work, and what responses did work. And because I did it over and over, now that I'm paying for leads more, now it basically allows me to be a very high converter because of all those conversations. So even like the telemarketing, it's almost like your cost per lead is so low with telemarketing. You're basically trading time that it gives you the opportunity to practice on a high volume of people to see if there's any motivation there on a high level, so that when it does get to the point where your conversion is decent, you can start investing it on pay per leads, you know?
That's right. And then what you were doing simultaneously is you were also learning, you were like sharpening the saw sort of thing. So you were making the calls, but then you were also role playing and practicing, seeking out role play partners who could kind of equip you and refine your approach. Right.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a process, man. But the idea is, and the main takeaway here is if somebody was to ask you, what's the most valuable use of your time right now? If your answer is not learning to become a dominant listing agent, your thinking needs adjustment.
Yeah. And it was funny. I ran into we went to buy sunglasses and went to Sunglass Hut, bought Mariela some sunglasses. And the girl kept hinting things. She's like, well, like, she's like, yeah, like, I'm like, how long have you been selling sunglasses? She's like, yeah, like, I've been doing it for like 10 years. She's like, and this is good until I get to my next venture. So when she said next venture, I'm already thinking she's already got something cooking that she
Yeah.
wants to tell me about,
Yeah.
but she hasn't mustered up the courage to say it. So I basically said, just out of curiosity, like, what is your next venture? She goes, selling real estate. And when she says that, she starts talking about like working with buyers and that how all her friends are going to be buying. And I told her, I'm like, what if you're looking at this the wrong way? Or what if I told you that working with buyers is actually the wrong thing to focus on when you build up your real estate career? And as soon as I said that, bro, she starts fighting it, bro. Like
Arguing.
argue.
Meanwhile, she's talking to the number one listing agent in Ventura County, bro, for 7 years in a row.
She had no idea, but she starts
Yeah.
arguing. So I just let it be, you know. I'm just like, I'm not gonna like get involved in a conversation because I could already tell that like she was getting defensive and it was it and I was with my wife. I'm like, I don't want to get into this deep conversation. I just want to buy the sunglasses, you know.
Yeah.
But
But here's what's wild. She would have asked you questions. You would have.
I would have let her
You
know,
probably
hey,
would have
look,
shared
this
some
is a
stuff
reason.
with
Yeah,
her.
I
You
would
would,
have.
yeah, you would have been like, and like, yeah, hey, I know you may not like, who am I? I'm just a guy. Hey, here's Zillow. Check this out. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now that we've established that there's a reason why you'd want to listen to what I have to say, I'm going to save you probably 6 to 12 months of heartache and you not becoming a statistic, because 75% of people, 70% of people who get their real estate license within a year are back selling glasses. And then share with her like, hey, that's so super interesting, right? She started to shut you down, like argue, just like the dude who we were just talking to before we
Yeah.
jumped on. He's shutting us down. He's arguing. It's like, okay, like you want to stay away from people that are closed-minded.
Well, I think too, even like if I was on the receiving end and somebody told, if I'm going into a new venture and somebody told me that, instead of getting defensive, my initial response would be like, well, tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Explain to me why that is true.
Yeah.
And then I would probably even get into some of the credentials for the individual. Be like, okay, so like let me ask you this, like how long have you been in the business? Like
Mm-hmm.
what type of volume do you do? Like tell me
Yeah.
about your back. And then as soon as I figure out some credentials and ask certain questions, then I can make a judgment call at that point whether that is believable or not believable, whether this is a believable person. And then at that point, I'm like, okay, thank you for guiding me in the right direction, you know?
And then maybe you would have handed her your card. Like there's a whole look at the possibilities, bro. You'd be like, hey, here's my card. Like, if you're interested. And then what's wild, she could have got coached by the number one real estate agent in Ventura County for free. But instead, she wanted to argue with you. How
Yeah.
interesting. Right. And that should be a lesson to all of us. So again, we appreciate you guys. And really be mindful of mental maps, be mindful of who you're taking information from. There's a recognition. I want the main takeaway from this call to be for you guys that your greatest vehicle for building wealth are not the investments that you make, it's your income. Stay focused on building your income, get into a community, whether it's ours or somebody else's, who will equip you to be able to earn income volume. I just had a call with Liz Casares, and she was in real estate for 6 months, did one rental, made like $300. She got into the ecosystem, Jose. She did 15 transactions, made over 6 figures. She's never done that in her life before.
Bought a house.
Bought a house. Bro, proximity's power, dude. So whether it's us or somebody else, just get into an environment where they can equip you to be able to increase your income, because that's the biggest tool that you have to build wealth.
Awesome.
Be
Later,
great,
guys. Peace.
Late.
Bye.